I know we said there was going to be an iceberg every week. We lied. Or I lied. This week we're going to be doing it's just as exciting, honestly. It's a story about Richard Sorge, who was named by Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond. James Bond was modeled after him, pretty much. The good parts and the bad parts, except he was a spy for the Soviets, so much better than a spy for the British.
Chad.
But he was named by Ian Fleming as the most formidable spy in history. And this story gets crazy, just bear with me for a little bit. But it gets crazy. And learn the story, and so did Gavin from Pros of the Round Table, the old podcast. That's not a thing anymore. And I got some new info that wasn't in that podcast, just to kind of mix it up a bit, so it's not totally dry.
Nice.
Yeah, but if you're interested in Soviet spies, definitely check out that episode of Pros of the Round Table. It's called Soviet Spies. But this is the most exciting one. There's a lot of adultery.
Yeah.
And womanizing. But at the same time, this guy was pretty awesome. Alright. So, code name. Do you remember his code name?
Was it something silly?
Yeah, kind of. Remember the I think it was Richard Philby who had the code name Liberal.
Liberal. I can't remember what this guy's code name is.
Code name Ramsey.
Ramsey, alright.
Like Chef Ramsay. Okay. So I'm just gonna go over through his personal history for quite a long time, just because it's interesting, and you get to see how he became the man that he once was, or that become the man that he grew to be. So Richard Sorge was a Soviet spy from 1920 to 1941. He is largely considered one of, if not the best spy of the 20th century, and his work most likely changed the course of world history forever. I would say it did. And again, the story gets crazy, so bear with us. Okay, so Sorge was born on October 4th, 1895 in Baku, Azerbaijan. It was then a part of the Russian Empire before the Soviet Union was a thing. It was 1895.
Yeah.
His father was actually German. He was a German mining engineer. And when his contract was up in Azerbaijan, they moved back to Berlin, Germany. But yeah, he was born in Azerbaijan. And there's a statue, I'll put a picture up, there's a statue in Azerbaijan of him now. It's like really cool. I'll show you too. It's got the eyes and like just like a flat wall with like just piercing eyes coming out of it.
I think you've shown me this.
Yeah.
That's cool.
There's a few statues of him, one in Russia too, I think, where it's just like a dude in a trench coat just like standing there.
Chad.
Yeah. Alright, yeah, but they moved back to Berlin, Germany. Interesting side note, actually, Sorge's great uncle, his name was Friedrich Sorge. He actually, he thought of him as his grandpa, but it was his great uncle. But he was an associate of Marx and Engels back in the day. He actually founded the first International Working Men's Association with them. One of the dudes who started the first socialist organization. Cool. And then his great, because back then the revolutionaries were just exiled permanently. Like Lenin got exiled, Marx was exiled from like every Western European country. Yeah, literally every single one. And
too chatted.
Yeah, I don't think Engels is exiled very often, but so his great uncle though moved to the U.S. and played an important role in the foundation of the Socialist Labor Party of America too. So he was like the founder of two giant socialist organizations. Pretty crazy, huh?
Yeah, that is crazy.
But growing up, they were not socialist. His dad was like a nationalist German. This is World War I, where nationalism is just all the rage. Yes.
Yeah.
And they were pretty bourgeois. He was an engineer, so they just lived a bourgeois lifestyle. And so at 18, Richard Sorge enlisted in the German army at 18. In October 1914, so literally as soon as he turned 18, he joined the German army during World War I. To the admiration of his father, who was a nationalist.
Hell yeah.
And he was like a really brave soldier. Actually, he won like an Iron Cross pretty much immediately. And then he was posted to a field artillery he was posted to a field artillery battalion on the Western Front, where he was severely wounded in 1916. So shrapnel severed 3 of his fingers and broke both of his legs, causing a limp for the rest of his life.
Fucking
just World War I hours right there, dude. I mean, shit.
yeah, for real.
If you don't die from mustard gas. And so he went to the war as a nationalist, following his father's own ideals. But after seeing the horrors of imperialist nationalist World War I, he started moving towards the left. Obviously, he became a Soviet spy. So
yeah,
his nurse's father, actually, while he was recovering from the shrapnel that blew his ass out, the nurse's father was a communist and brought him Marx and Engels to read.
hell yeah, dude.
He had a relationship with that nurse. Recovering from his broken... My dude! There's literally no woman, if he didn't like him, he wouldn't just, like, get her somehow. He's not even the most handsome dude in the world, either.
He's just built different.
He's kind of ruggedly handsome, but he's not, like, a model-looking thing or anything.
Yeah.
He looked really old for his years towards the end of his life, you know, because, I mean, being a spy, dude, that's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
After World War I, he went to join in the German Revolution. So, you know, after World War I, there was a attempted revolution in Germany, just like there was in most Western European countries following the Soviet Union's revolution. But he arrived in Berlin with his comrades with a bunch of arms, too late to join. Rosa and Karl Liebknecht were already fucking executed, so he arrived too late. Sad.
That is sad.
Although maybe good because he lived. But he eventually got a doctorate in political science and continued to devote himself to communist revolution. So he was already fluent in German. He became fluent in Russian, English, French, Japanese, and Chinese.
Fucking Chad.
Dude, all these spies are always just like, yeah, they know like every language. During this time, he worked as a teacher, journalist, as well as a coal miner. Even though he was way above that, he just wanted to like join with the workers' struggle there. And so now we're going to start approaching Sorge's extreme horniness. When he began an affair with one of his professor's wives, Christine Gerlach. He's cucking his professor, dude.
His professor while he was a student?
No, he had graduated, but yeah, his professor. And this is what Christine said about him, or about the situation. She said, quote, "It was as if a stroke of lightning hit me. In this 1 second, something awoke in me that had slumbered until now." But dude was just a hypnotist, dude. I don't understand. He was just the most charming dude ever.
Just had to sleep with Richard.
It's so silly,
his
dude.
name?
Richard Sorge, yeah.
Richard Sorge, yeah.
Right? Yes. Okay, that would be sad if we got it wrong. And so yeah, this is like the power of Sorge's charisma. He was just like alluring to everyone, and that's a perfect gift for being a spy.
For real.
And so Sorge's devotion to the communist cause attracted the attention of the newly formed Soviet Union intelligence apparatus. And so in 1925, when he was recruited as a spy. So he resigned as a member of the KPD, which was the Communist Party of Deutschland, and became an agent of the Comintern. He was so good at showing everyone his rejection of his Marxist ideals, because you know that he was like, okay, I gotta completely back off from this, so I'm gonna be a spy. That even some of his comrades who knew he was a spy were like, are you really... Like, he convinced them just because he was so good at it.
That's funny. Because
before, he would just be like, always be reading Marxist literature and newspapers, and then after that, he showed no interest in it. And he immediately began studying Nazism, anti-Semitism, and fascism, even though at this point in Germany, there were still like fringe movements. But he sort of, well, maybe not just casual anti-Semitism, but you know, like structured, organized Nazism. But he became like one of the best scholars on that subject because he kind of just knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so in 1929, the Comintern told him to officially join the Nazi Party. And so one of his comrades stated, quote, his joining the Nazi Party in his own country, where he had an extensive and well-documented police record, was hazardous to say the least. His staying in Berlin while his application for membership was being processed was indeed flirting with death, but such actions were typical of his superb self-assurance. So yeah, even though everyone knew he was a communist, he just like convinced people he was done with that shit. He's like, I'm a Nazi now.
White power, yeah, guys.
Right.
Like,
And so at this point, he got recognized as a Nazi, and he was moving around everywhere to China and Russia, and like at this point in his life, he was talking about how hard it was to pretend to be a Nazi, because like he's a alcoholic, like really bad.
Oh,
and so
shit.
it was really hard for him because he had to stop drinking, because when he got drunk, he just got rowdy and just started shitting on everybody. And so, he started moving around everywhere to China and Russia, working as a journalist in Nazi newspapers, but he was just moving around doing spy shit at the same time.
Yeah.
He married Katya Maximova when he was in Moscow, and this whole time he was still being a prolific womanizer. Just marrying people, divorcing them, or just moving away. And his style. Okay, no, he loved driving motorcycles really, really fast. Those old-fashioned, like, crazy German-looking motorcycles.
Yeah.
And so his routine for seduction would involve convincing a woman he met at like a bar to join him in a bike ride around the city, and he would just go ridiculously fast.
Just endanger them.
Yes.
Good.
Just go terrifyingly fast, it said. And so, yeah, he was doing all this crazy stuff. We haven't gotten to like his really important contributions to world history, and so it's now 1933, and Moscow sent Sorge to Japan to establish a spy network. Because it was already evident at this time to the Soviets that Germany was going to invade them, and that Japan was one of their allies, so they wanted to get in there and, learn things between Germany and Japan.
Yeah. Get a network going.
Yeah. And they were worried that if the Germans invaded from the west and the Japanese from the east, they would have a really hard time with that one. And so Sorge's directives were to work for peace and send back all info on military preparations from Japan and Germany. And so to get cover for his move to Tokyo, Sorge went back to Germany and got a job as a journalist stationed in Japan in 1933. His spy network there included Max Clausen, Ozaki Hotsumi, Branko Vucelik, and Yutoko Miyagi. And British intelligence officer and author of Spycatcher, a very famous book, Peter Wright, stated that Sorge's ring was one of the finest espionage rings history has ever known. And so Sorge was successful at appearing to be a passionate member of the Nazi Party. And this allowed him to work directly in the German embassy in Tokyo. This is one of the silliest stories there is. So he's convinced all the Nazis that he's a Nazi.
Yeah,
and just is like hanging around with Nazis all day. And he knew pretty much everyone in Tokyo, because he was just like a really popular dude, even among the Japanese.
Yeah.
And so the Nazis would come to Sorge asking for, news around town and all that. And he also had with his, through Ozaki Hatsumi and Yutoko Miyagi, they were also really in with the Japanese government. Like, I think one of those guys was actually like an assistant to the King of Japan.
Oh, shit.
So, dude, they knew everything.
Dude, that's awesome.
And so, yeah, they would come, and he would brief them on Japanese news and all that. And so, but in 1938, Eugene Ott replaced Herbert von Dirksen as ambassador to Japan, the Nazis.
Yeah.
And Eugene Ott was known as, like, the Butcher of Warsaw. This was before Einsatzgruppen made it, like, Nazi protocol to just shoot everybody. And so when the Nazis found out what he did in Warsaw, I think it was Warsaw, they were like, they wanted to try this guy for war crimes. The Nazis wanted to try this Nazi for war crimes.
That's insane.
That's insane.
So he must have been fucking ridiculously awful.
Yes.
The Nazis were like, hold on now.
Just absolutely despicable human. And so fucking Sorge has to deal with this now fucking super Nazi.
Super Nazi.
Literally a super Nazi. And, but they became really good friends. It said, he was actually, Eugene Ott's, one of his main reasons for going there was because the Nazis have realized that some of their secrets were being leaked from Tokyo.
Oh, shit.
And so he was specifically sent there to find the mole and take care of him. And, like, Sorge was already on their radar. But he gets there, and Sorge goes drinking with him. And by the end of the day, he just had him, dude. They were just best buddies.
Bought it.
Yes.
That's fucking epic.
And Eugene Ott actually wanted Sorge to start working officially for the German government as one of his assistants.
Yeah.
But Sorge could not do that because they would do a background check and they'd be like, what the fuck, this guy is a communist back in the day. And so he convinced Eugene Ott that he would take an unofficial role. So he wouldn't officially work for him, but he would have a job for Eugene Ott where he would just meet him for breakfast every morning and Eugene Ott would just tell him everything about the Nazis.
What's this fucking Eugene guy up to, man?
He's a horrible person. He's dumb at the same time.
Straight idiotic, bro.
Okay, now this is where it gets super rowdy.
Yeah.
So, Sorge was cucking Eugene Ott at the same time.
He's fucking his wife?
He was fucking his wife. The fucking super Nazi's wife, dude.
Dude. Eugene. Or not you. Yeah. No.
Eugene found out. He didn't give a shit. He just was like, have fun.
Alright, bro.
What in the fuck? Dude, I guess the fucking, Nazis being cucks is just true for all time. But yeah, he was just banging his wife and Eugene did not care. He actually gave him free reign of the embassy after that, night and day.
He's a better, stronger man.
Seriously. He's just like, respect, you got this.
Yeah, whatever. That's fucking wild, dude.
Yeah. So, yeah, Eugene Ott was actually the head of the Gestapo's intelligence network in the Far East. So, that's the kind of info he was getting, just everything. And then, so, another one of Sorge's horniness coming through, he met Miyake, Hinako Miyake, a 25-year-old bar girl, on his 40th birthday. And, took her out the following day, and it was not long before she was his mistress. So he had another mistress.
Yeah, very.
And so my dude is just like banging and just being a Nazi, just crazy, dude.
He's living it up in Japan.
He really was. And so, oh yeah, there's also stories of he would go, he was a drunk, probably from all the stress.
Yeah.
And pretending to be a Nazi. He would go to, so we actually learned about Operation Barbarossa, which was the Nazi operation to invade the Soviet Union, full force. And that night he just got brutally wasted at the bar. Just because he's just like, fuck, dude, right? And then he started yelling at all the, because he's in a German bar.
Yeah.
And he just started yelling about how Hitler is a fucking idiot and that Stalin's gonna teach him a lesson.
No!
Yeah, he just starts,
Richard!
he just starts going off on how shitty Hitler is. And he tried to drive home, but one of the German guys were like, dude, let's get you home, man. I'll drive you. And it's just like, fuck Hitler.
They weren't like,
No, dude. I have no idea what was going on here, but
huh.
yeah.
They just let him, they were like, alright, bro.
He was just so charismatic, and I think they were just probably thought he was just passionate, and he thought that Operation Barbarossa was actually a mistake, so they were just like, because, they had a peace treaty at the time.
Yeah. he's like, man, this guy, he's just putting his real Nazi opinions out there, you know?
Yeah.
How brave.
How Nazi of you.
How Nazi of you.
And so, so Max Clausen was actually one of the guys in the spy ring. Actually, was starting to become a Nazi at this time, for reals. Max Clausen.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah, and he was the radio guy. So Sorga never learned how to use a radio.
Oh,
You
no.
know, back in the day, it was like
You had to do
beep,
shit.
beep, 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 or something like that. You know.
Yeah.
And so everything Sorga was sending to the Soviets was heavily filtered.
Oh, no.
From fucking Max Clausen, okay? And Max Clausen actually lived through this and was a hero in East Germany because they didn't know he was actually a Nazi. They just thought he was part of Richard Sorge's ring. Pretty fucked up, huh?
What a fucker.
Yeah. But, so once Sorge learned about Operation Barbarossa, obviously he had to tell the Soviets, and so he was telling Max Clausen, send this out, send this out, send this out.
And he didn't?
And he didn't. He didn't send out shit.
What a fuck.
And so Richard Sorge was like freaking out because for like weeks he didn't hear anything back, right? And he's just like, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. Nobody is responding. And so what he did was he leaked it to Western press.
Oh shit.
I think it was like New York Times or Washington Post, or not Washington Post, probably like The Economist or something like that. He leaked it and it was published in the newspaper, but it was published in like the back pages. And so the word did get to the Soviets and did help them prepare. Also, he helped the Soviets not station so many men on the east because they didn't know who was going to attack them first, Japan or Germany. And so they had, you know, giant regiments of soldiers in Siberia and the east. But because of Richard Sorge's info and everything that wasn't filtered out, the Soviets were able to shift all their soldiers to the west.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, who knows? That right there could have been, Moscow could have been taken over just from that.
Literally.
Considering how fucking close the Nazis came. Yeah, so, I mean, that's immediately one of the largest contributions to history you could possibly make.
Yeah.
Protecting the world from Nazis. And so, he leaked it to, and then he actually leaked to the Soviets that Pearl Harbor was going to happen. Like, in 1941, you know? And so Sorge and his comrades provided Stalin with the information that the Japanese were preparing to make war in the Pacific and were concentrating their main forces in that area in the belief that the Germans would defeat the Red Army. So Sorge informed of Pearl Harbor happening, and he told the Soviets that they would not be attacked by Japan. And so at this point, the Japanese, and so he spent a lot of time in Singapore, Sorge, which was in China.
Yeah.
And at this time, in Singapore, or maybe it was Shanghai, I think it was Shanghai, one of those cities, I think it was Shanghai. You know, there was like, it was so weird in China at the time, they were just getting butchered by the Japanese and just like didn't have a full government.
Yeah.
And so this city was controlled, it was perfect for spies because you could only be arrested by your embassy. There was no Chinese police force. So it was like, if you were a spy there, you would never get arrested by the people you were spying on.
I see.
But since he made his way to Tokyo, you know, the Japanese were really disciplined at this time and like ready to find out any spies.
Fascist.
Yes.
Shit. Yeah.
So it was very hard in that way. And the Japanese became convinced there was a spy inside the German embassy after it was leaked that, because Sorge told the Germans, because that was also his, you know, how he was in with the Germans, he would tell the Germans Japanese secrets. And so they found out that Pearl Harbor was going to happen, you know. And they were kind of upset about that because they wanted Japan to invade from the east and against the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And so they became convinced there was a spy. And this is where it really starts to unravel for our boy Richard Sorge. And so they also discovered that an illegal radio transmitter was being used by the Russians in Tokyo. And so it's actually a funny story at this time where Richard Sorge was at his house just like writing on a desk. And Japanese cops were knocking on the door because they were visiting like all the German people to try and find his spies, right? And so they're knocking on his door. He doesn't answer, and so they come in, and he's just like sitting at his desk writing papers. And once they walk in, he's like, "What the fuck? Get out of my house!" Right? He punches the cop in the face. Okay, he punches the cop in the face and was like, "Get out!" And then the cop ended up apologizing to him, like, "You know what? We're sorry.
Sorry, dude.
We should not have walked in your house." Like, and so he's like, "It's okay, man." And then he gave him his best pair of shoes. Richard Sorge was like, "Here, take my best pair of shoes, man. I'm sorry for punching you in the face."
Dude's like, "Thanks, man. Perfect size."
And so the next day, the police chief for like Tokyo came over, and they had dinner together, and then the police chief burned Sorga's files in front of him. This is how impressive this guy is,
He's
dude.
just fucking insane. What?
He's just OP as a spy, dude. They were just like, "Okay, look, we're very sorry for what happened. Here's your files. We're getting rid of them." And Sorga's, of course, like, "Nah, you don't have to do that. I know it's just your job." And they're like, "Look, burn it."
Yeah.
Okay, so but in October 1941, the Japanese police arrested Yotugo Miyagi, one of the key figures in Sorga's network who was working for the Japanese embassy. He attempted suicide by leaping headfirst from an upper story window of the police station, but shrubbery broke his fall, and under torture he confessed everything.
Oh no.
And gave the name of Sorga and his associates.
Poor guy.
So Sorga was placed under surveillance, and it was arranged for him to have an affair. So they were like, "Okay, how do we catch this guy? We get the hot detective to go in and fucking trick him." So they had this woman named Kiyomi, a spy working for the Japanese Secret Service. One night, she invited him to go out to eat with her. And one night they were in a restaurant together. She noticed the waiter drop a tiny ball of rice paper on the table. And Sorga picked it up and learned that he was in danger of being arrested. So someone was like one of his confidants, you know?
That's cool.
Pretty crazy, right?
That is crazy.
And he was urged to leave. And so when he was in the car, Sorga attempted to set fire to the piece of paper. But when the lighter failed him, he asked Kiyomi for a light, but she pretended she could not give him one. Exasperated, he threw the rice paper out of the window and drove off. Kiyomi asked Sorga to stop the car so that she could warn her parents that she was staying out for the night.
Oh.
He agreed, and she rang up the secret police and told them exactly where the paper had been dropped. And it was immediately recovered, and Sorga was then arrested.
Should have ate the paper, bro.
And so, like, he got home, and the story of his arrest was like he was just sitting on his couch. And, you know, the fascist police just came in and just sat next to him for like 10 minutes waiting for their chief to come, and he just like sat there. He knew it was over, and then they took him in. And so his Nazi buddy, Ambassador Eugene Ott, was outraged when he heard that Sorga had been arrested, quote, on suspicion of espionage, and thought it was a typical case of Japanese espionage hysteria. He told people around him, quote, "Sorga a spy? What twaddle? I would put my hand in the fire for the man." Another German guy named Heinrich Loy, who was working in Tokyo, also found it difficult to believe. Quote, I've known Sorga personally for a long time, but this news surprised me and made me realize he was different from other people. Normally, people you've known a long time will make a careless slip on some occasion, particularly when someone drinks like a fish, as Sorga did. You expect that he will reveal his true self. Considering that he managed to conceal his identity up until now, I have to say he was an exceptional man. Even though he's like, "Fuck the Nazis," every time he drinks, they're like, "Man, who would have guessed?"
Seriously cool, man. Genius.
Okay. And so after like months of interrogation, when he didn't confess anything. And this is one thing about Richard Sorge, is a lot of like Western historians will say he was a Trotskyist, because the spies at this time for the Soviet Union were like the best spies in history, because they were very dedicated to the cause, obviously.
Yeah.
Because most of them weren't even getting paid. They were just like, you know, trying to do it for ideological reasons. And so they say because they were trying to spread revolution everywhere that they had to have been Trotskyists. But that's just a misunderstanding of Marxism-Leninism. Because they say, oh, Stalin didn't want revolution everywhere because they had revolution in Russia. Because that was the debate that Trotsky had, was that he wanted literally to just, invade Western Europe and have them all be Soviets. And it's just we have to build up socialism in this country first.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you don't want to spread revolution everywhere. So they're calling him a Trotskyist, which is just ridiculous to me.
It's completely different, yeah. Overt, straight invasion and enforcement of rules instead of, the covert.
Or it's just not common sense.
Yeah.
It's you have a peasant country, you gotta build socialism there. You knew they were gonna be invaded real soon. But anyways, because of this, a lot of them claim that Stalin kind of just ignored. They say Stalin for every fucking Soviet government anything. It's just oh, Stalin did this, Stalin did that. No. The Soviet government didn't exchange prisoners to get out Richard Sorge. And that's sad, because Richard Sorge thought they would for a long time, but it was very chaotic at that time. They were just on the verge of World War II, if it hadn't already started. It did start. It was 1944. It was almost over.
Yeah.
And,
they were in it at that time.
Yeah. And they were having a lot of trouble knowing who exactly was the right spy. It was it's not like today where you can pick up a phone. It's totally hard to communicate.
Yeah.
And so, one day they came in and he knew it was the day they were going to execute him. He asked for a cigarette and they wouldn't give him one.
Doesn't even get a cig.
And one of the Japanese guys was just give him a cigarette, come on. We'll say it was for medicine. And they were no cigarettes. And so he was bound hand and foot, the noose already set around his neck. This is a quote from one of his Japanese captors. Tall, blue-eyed, ruggedly good-looking, and apparently unperturbed by his imminent demise. Sorge was contributing the perfect denouement to what he might have well assumed was an enduring myth in the making. They were already dude, this guy is epic. What the fuck?
I would suck his cock.
Right? His last words in fluent Japanese were the Red Army, the International Communist Party, and the Soviet Communist Party. And they hung him. Sad.
Fucking built different, though. That is sad.
Absolutely. It took a long time for the Soviet Union to fully learn the story of Richard Sorge and to understand the weight behind his sacrifice and just how ridiculously good he was.
Yeah.
Because they had to get files from the Japanese, they had to get files from their files on intelligence,
That's a lot of shit to sort through.
Yeah, to find out who was who. They're all using code names.
It's not like they had computers back then, too.
Yep.
At least not practical ones.
On the 5th of November, 1964, 20 years after his death, the Soviet Union awarded Sorge the title Hero of the Soviet Union. Sorge's mistress, Hanako Miyake, was still alive, and she was granted a pension by the Soviet government, and this was paid until her death until July 2000. So even the Russian government was still paying it.
That's fucking sick.
Yeah.
Just one of his mistresses.
Yeah, I don't know. Alright, so that was the story of Richard Sorge. Sorry, there's no iceberg video. It's been very chaotic this past week for us. Driving everywhere, and then I'm switching jobs at the same time, but I should have more time once I do switch jobs. So maybe not next week, I'll be honest, but the week after we might have an iceberg video.
Soon.
We'll probably have another video next week if it's not an iceberg, something cool like this one.
It at least won't be a month and a half or 2 months.
Yeah, no, it will not be that long. But yeah, that was the story of the most formidable spy in history, Richard Sorge. You should look him up and read more. It's fascinating.